Welcome to San Dieguito Academy's first parent education webinar. My name is Celeste Abdelnabi, and I am the SDA assistant principal who works with our wonderful counseling department. This is our first experiment using an online platform to engage with families, and we welcome your feedback. This webinar is being recorded and will be accessible through the parent education link on the San Dieguito Academy website. Today's webinar will address suicide warning signs and how families can start a conversation about this important topic. If you have questions during the live webinar, you can open a chat window with an SDA counselor by clicking on the chat bubble icon to the right of this window. If you have specific concerns about your child that you want to discuss, don't hesitate to reach out to your child's counselor directly. And without further ado, I am pleased to introduce you to today's presenter, Ms. Ann Nebelon. Ms. Nebelon has been a counselor at San Dieguito Academy for 20 years. She earned her master's degree in educational counseling from San Diego State University. Ms. Nebelon has 2 children of her own and is deeply committed to helping SDA students find solutions so they can be safe, healthy, and happy. Ms. Nebelon, you're on.
All right, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us and being a part of this first webinar. Hopefully it proves to be very helpful. We will be covering why focus on suicide, risk factors, warning signs, protective factors, how to respond, and then the SDA services and supports that we currently provide, and of course some additional follow-up resources. So why focus on suicide? It's the 3rd leading cause of death for youth ages 10 through 14, the 2nd leading cause of death for teens ages 15 to 24. That's our kids. The 2nd leading cause of death. I probably don't even need to say much more than that. That's definitely says the seriousness. For every young person who dies by suicide, an estimated 1 to 200 make an attempt. 1 dies by suicide per month in San Diego County, and the youth suicide rates have doubled in the last 2 decades, with San Diego being above the national average. So we collected some statistics, and the first set is from our most recent California Healthy Kids Survey results. And this is what our kids are reporting, our students from SDA. 7 to 10% have reported attempting suicide. 17 to 20% report having considered it. Then 26.8% reported feeling so sad they stopped their usual activities. That's a huge warning sign. And that's up from 22% in 2015. So it is a growing concern. The second set of data here is from the 2015 California High School Youth Risk Behavior Survey results. And you can see it matches pretty much what our kids are saying. So this isn't a problem at our school. It's a problem in our state and across the nation, probably across the world. In the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, 8.2% reported attempting suicide. Our kids said 7 to 10%. 17.9% reported having considered suicide, and our kids say 17 to 20%. So it definitely lines up.
So Ms. Nebelon, just to clarify, the statistics at the top for the California Healthy Kids Survey results, those are our SDA students. Those are their responses. And then what was at the bottom of the screen is the statewide statistics. So we're pretty much right in line, not more or less.
Correct.
Than what is kind of being seen statewide.
Correct. And I wanted to point that out because I think a lot of people think, well, we live in this community it's so great and this is such a great school and nothing happens around here. Well, it does. The same things that happen anywhere across our nation are happening here at our school. So it is a concern.
Thank you.
The risk factors, there's quite a few of them. They're all things to pay attention to. If there's been a previous suicide of a family member or a friend, history of suicidal thoughts, ideation, self-harming. And I want to say real quick that self-harming isn't necessarily an indicator of a student being suicidal, but it is a red flag and it is a risk factor. And in itself, it is an issue that needs to be addressed. Disabilities, substance abuse issues, depression, it's highlighted because I feel like just pretty much every student we talk to that is feeling suicidal has some level of depression. So that's a huge indicator. Aggression, especially if that's something new, and risky behaviors, those things, especially if it's a change for them. If they have a low stress tolerance, impulsivity, feelings of hopelessness and loneliness, I hear kids say that quite frequently. Stressful circumstances like abuse, any kind of abuse. It can be physical, sexual, mental, emotional, verbal abuse can create extra stress. Bullying, dysfunctional home life, unhealthy relationship, all those things, anything that causes additional stress, which is, that's a lot of things, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on. And then parent mental health issues or the death of a parent or close family member. And if there's no mental health care available, that's pretty critical. Exposure to discrimination based on sexual orientation, gender, race and ethnicity, physical characteristics. And that probably really falls under the category of bullying, because a lot of times kids are bullied for those things, and can cause extra stress and low self-esteem and depression, things like that. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or questioning kids, it's documented that they have a higher risk of suicide if they fall under the LGBTQ category. Homeless or out-of-home settings like foster care, or under the care of a guardian in the juvenile system, or have been in the juvenile system or welfare system. And then if they've suffered a traumatic experience.
Again, another follow-up question for you, Ms. Nebelan. Going back up to, I think it's maybe the 5th bullet down, stressful circumstances. You mentioned bullying. Students who are targeted by bullying could be at a higher risk for thinking about suicide. In elementary school, I know we think about bullying as being more of the physical or name calling. At the high school level, it's a little different. Is it more relationship based or social media type of bullying that you see at the high school level?
Definitely. At the high school level, kids are, well, they're starting to engage in relationships, different types of relationships, and then also they're involved more on social media. So those things are increased definitely for high school, and that we do see that a lot at the high school level.
Thank you.
I wanted to note also under suffered traumatic experiences, if your son or daughter has had a traumatic experience, even if it's something from their past when they were really young and maybe they were even treated for it, it could be different now, because as teenagers, they're starting to think and feel more like young adults, not like little kids anymore, and they may revisit some of those feelings and need some additional support. Okay, so some of the warning signs, things to watch for. Of course, obviously, any kind of a focus on suicide or death in conversations, in writings, drawings, social media posts, and that's bolded because we get a lot of referrals about concerns for kids through things that other students may have seen on social media, and it's become super common. But I think you also want to take a look at anything in the conversations, drawings, writings, anything like that, that just even have a darker side to them. So it might not be an explicit threat or comment, but it could be you're noticing like a darkness in the kinds of things that they're saying. So also threats to harm oneself. So if they're talking about hurting themselves, whether it's verbal, written, or social media, that's definitely a warning sign. Giving away most valuable possessions, isolation from friends and family, like they just don't want to participate anymore. Any changes in behavior. So you want to look for any kind of anxiousness, impulsivity, They're irritable, agitated, low motivation, sleeping too much or too little, and drastic drop in grades and attendance. And not that any of those things automatically mean that they're feeling suicidal, but those are things to watch. It means something's happening, something that you need to look into a little bit more. They might also show a loss of interest in some of their favorite things, and they talk about feeling hopeless or having no reason to live. Those are pretty direct warning signs when the student might say something real specific. And of course, any changes in mood and appearance, especially if they seem to be sustained, they're not self-correcting. Then there are many protective factors at both school and at home. And these are the kinds of things we want our kids to have, these things so that they're stronger and they feel more resilient and that they know how to handle things. So obviously having a positive school experience is going to be a protective factor for them. We want them to feel safe here at school, feeling part of the school community. Their relationships with their peers are good. Like I was saying, it feels like a safe environment, both physically and emotionally. And in the counseling office at SDA here, we try really hard to have this open door policy. Kids walk in and we want to find out, what do they need? And if it's an immediate concern, we address it immediately. We want them to have a sense of connectedness to school, and that can be in many ways, just that they are engaged in their classes. Maybe they do extracurricular things, but a sense of school is a good place to be. They're in the school community, that there's respect for the cultures of all the students, that they are feeling academically successful, and that they know that they can seek out an adult and get some help when needed. At home, family support and acceptance. And I bolded acceptance because I think that's really critical for all kids. A lot of times they feel like, oh, you know, my mom and dad don't like what I'm doing, or they don't think I'm doing it good enough, or they just don't feel good enough or accepted. And so helping them know that you accept them for who they are can go a long, long way. Can also help open up communication lines too. So at home, access to healthcare, mental and physical, their emotional intelligence, meaning that really what that means is that they're able to express themselves emotionally. They have the words to connect to the feelings, and that they're able to express that. Healthy family dynamics is really important, that they are encouraged to have positive self-worth and coping skills when things are a little bit rough, that they know they can get through it and they know how to solve problems. And maybe that means talking it through at home with you. Now, if your son or daughter does express some kind of concern about feeling suicidal, feeling hopeless, the number one thing you want to do is you just want to remain really calm, really non-judgmental, and you want to listen. Like really just stop what you're doing and listen, and encourage them to keep going. Like, oh, tell me more. I want to hear what you have to say. I want to help. Just, you know, keep encouraging them to tell you a little bit more. You want to remain really calm, because if you flip out, that's going to shut down the, it could shut them down and make them feel like they just can't say anymore. So that right there is super critical. And you want to avoid any statements that minimize how they're feeling, like, oh, you need to move on. You're going to be just fine. Just get over it. That's very minimizing. Don't say anything like that. Just listen. Also, you may want to ask them directly if they are thinking about suicide. If they're talking and you're thinking like, wow, are they talking about suicide? Just ask them, are you talking about suicide? Are you having suicidal feelings and thoughts? And if they say yes, tell me more about that. Please share with me how you're feeling. Don't be afraid to ask. Focus on your concern for their safety and well-being. Reassure them that there is help and they will not always feel like this. They can get through this and you will help them. Do not leave them alone and never agree to keep it a secret. It happens pretty regularly that kids do not want their counselor to tell their parents, and they don't, they want it kept a secret. You can't do that. You have to seek out some help immediately. And when you think about it, if they're talking to you about this, they want something to change. They want something to get better. So just let them know that you're going to seek out help and you're not going to keep it a secret, but you're going to respect their privacy and go through this with them. Take every comment and concern seriously. Never minimize it. So even if they say, well, sometimes I think about it, but I would never do it. They're thinking about it, and that's not a healthy thing for a teenager. So every comment and concern needs to be taken seriously. You want to get help immediately. Even if they're saying, no, I wouldn't really do it, you want to get help because they're thinking about it, they're considering it, there's something going on that they need help and support. You can seek help from school and community mental health resources, your family doctor. If it's an immediate, they're making statements where they are immediately in danger of suicide, then you want to take them to the local hospital. And you can go to an ER room and just tell them that directly.
Ms. Devlin, this is the piece that I, struggle the most with is how to respond, because you don't want to make a mistake. This is really hard, especially from the parent perspective. I want to make sure I understand your suggestions here. So in the second bullet there, you say, avoid making statements that minimize their feelings. So we don't want to disregard that you should just get over it and that kind of thing. But then you also said a little bit further down that it's okay to reassure them that things are going to get better. Help me understand the difference between those so I don't say the wrong thing.
Well, and that's a great question, because to me, when you say that there's going to be help, we're going to get you help, you won't always feel like this, is hopeful. And so it lets them know that you're going to help, you're going to take charge a little bit and you're going to help. So that provides some hopefulness, and a lot of times kids will feel very alone in how they're feeling. And what you're saying is, you're not alone. I'm here for you. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. At SDA, we provide some services. If you have a concern and you're calling school, we're telling you, call the counseling office, call your son or daughter's counselor, our assistant principals, you can call them too. We're all very ready and willing and ready to help in any way possible. We also have a school psychologist here on campus. She's an amazing support, our school social worker. So we have quite a few adults that are actually highly trained to help and to support in this with this issue. We also have a PALS program. Those are our peer assistance listeners, and there's 14 students. They're all juniors and seniors, and they've been trained to help even if a student comes in and talks about suicide. And basically they're trained that if that's what happens, they go get a counselor. So we have that happen fairly often. I think kids sometimes feel safe telling a pal, a peer first, and just checking the reaction. And by the time we step in, it's like it's already out, and maybe it's been tempered a little bit. So we also do support groups. Between the 4 counselors, we run 7 support groups a week. There's groups for all boys and all girl groups. There's also an LGBTQ support group. All our students have had a training. Our pals did a yellow ribbon day, and yellow ribbon just is a symbol of suicide prevention through the homerooms. And that was in October, and went into every single homeroom and gave a presentation much like this, only a little more simplified with warning signs and then what to do. Our staff has had, our entire staff has had a training also on watching for warning signs and reporting. And then we have another page at the end here that has additional resources. The first one is just a link to our district website that has quite a few things on it. And part of that is it has the suicide prevention policy and procedures manual that we put together over the summer that you're welcome to take a look at. And there's some good connections here. So I know that was a lot of information. We tried to keep it simple enough to just give you what you need. Definitely open for questions. And if you have any concerns, whether immediate or not, please contact your son or daughter's counselor, and we are happy to help in any way we can. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Nevalon. So we, again, like Ms. Nevalon said, you are welcome to pose confidential questions in the chat feature over to the right of the screen, and we have several counselors here that can answer your questions directly. I see some people are typing now. We've had a few questions come in, and so I want to pose those to you and see if these are a little bit more generalized that other people might be interested. Someone had asked, how often are some of the statistics that you gathered, that you shared, gathered? For instance, the California Healthy Kids Survey results. How often do we get a feel for what's going on here on campus?
Yeah, the Healthy Kids Survey is done every 2 years. So the 2017 is, of course, very recent data for us. And I don't know how often the youth risk survey is conducted. I think it's a yearly survey. We will continue to keep those statistics updated each year.
And the California Healthy Kids Survey is administered, like you said, every other year in odd numbered years. This spring, we are going to be, because this is one of our off years here on campus, but we're going to be administering our own SDA Connectedness Survey, getting specifically at the questions from the Healthy Kids Survey. We're going to ask our students so we can have every year, and maybe even can dig in a little bit deeper on the information and look at some specific student groups and things like that. It's anonymous, but we can still look at some demographic factors. Those statistics are available online as well. So if people want to look up California Healthy Kids Survey, we can share them with them here at the site. That I saw was a fear or a worry that if bringing this up with a student who you have a concern about, should I be worried about encouraging a student to think about it if they haven't already thought about it? So we're talking about suicide, encourage suicide attempts.
You know, that's a great question. And I just yesterday read another article about that because there is a lot of fear around, I don't want to say that word, I don't want to put any ideas in their head. But there is no data, no statistics, no evidence showing that by bringing that topic up, that it's going to cause a student to feel that way. So instead, the other side of it is when you bring up that topic, it's telling them it's safe. You are a safe person to talk to them about that. And so really, it's all about communication. We have to start not being afraid to say the word suicide. It is a scary word, but we need to not desensitize ourselves to it, but to make it part of a conversation. And I think I just ask kids when they come into my office, are you feeling suicidal? Nobody's shocked. It doesn't, instead it just promotes a conversation. So don't be afraid to talk about it. It's not going to cause harm.
Thank you. Another question that just came in is referring to the presentation you just did in the section regarding protective factors. You mentioned that building self-worth and coping mechanisms, those are important protective factors to help buffer our students from being at risk. Do you have any resources or guidance about how to build teens' self-worth or a list of coping mechanisms? Where can we go to get more information on building those protective factors?
Well, I'm not sure what I do when I want more information is I just start, doing a Google research, but I look for reliable sources. So you want to be careful what you read, the kind of information you might get from the internet, make sure it's coming from a very reliable source. And I believe this is something we are going to explore more as a school site. And so there may be some more resources coming down the road, but building self-worth is really, it's a lot of the other things I was saying, like you want to listen, you want to accept your child for who they are, you want to encourage them in their interests and activities, and really do all you can to promote them being happy, healthy young people seeking out safe activities and things that just build on who they are. So as a parent, I think most parents kind of pretty much know that, and you know your child best. And then as for coping strategies, if things aren't going well, we get calls and emails about that all the time, and just ask a lot of questions on what can we, what's going on, and then what can we do to change that up.
And I appreciate them asking that question. We are going to, hopefully, if this goes well, if it's well received, we're going to be hosting additional webinars, and we're not giving up on the traditional face-to-face, meeting in the library or learning commons sessions. We'll continue to do those as well. We just thought this might allow additional people to have access to the information. So with that said, we would love suggestions or requests for topics, and this is a perfect one. So we will dig in and do some research, and maybe we can get back to people on that. Got one more question so far. Again, sort of a fear, a risk about bringing this up. Are people who threaten suicide, might they just be seeking attention? Is there a danger of, I don't know, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Help me.
Okay, so this is something I always say. I always think this: if we'll talk to parents, and some will say, well, they're just seeking attention. They're real attention seekers. And if they're talking about suicide and threatening suicide, I say let's give them attention, but let's give them the right attention. So maybe they do have to go to the doctor. Maybe they do have to be assessed at a hospital. Maybe they do need to work with a therapist, because it's a problem either way. If they're threatening it for attention, that's a problem. If they're threatening it because they're truly feeling that way, that's a problem. So if you look at it that way and move forward in really in the same way, because if they say it says something. And give them attention. Just give them the right attention. It's a good, that's a good example of that's something you would not want to minimize. Like, oh, you're just doing that for attention. Well, you might know they're doing it for attention, but you don't want to minimize how they're feeling, because maybe they are doing it for attention, and maybe they truly are feeling that way. You want to get to the root of the problem.
So just my last question for you. So if there's one takeaway that you would want people who are listening, families who are listening to leave with, what would you most want to communicate about this topic in our first conversation?
It makes me think of what we told all the students when we went in and did the training with them. We made sure that we did not leave that classroom until the students knew what to do if either they are feeling that way, and that message was to tell a trusted adult. Part of their presentation, which is on our counseling website, but part of their presentation included who the trusted adults are at school, which is basically every adult, and then who some trusted adults are at home. So in the context of parents, and I think the biggest takeaway is, if you have any inkling of any concern on any level that your son or daughter might be heading down that road, or actually making explicit comments about feeling suicidal, seek help immediately. And that means help from professionals, people who would really know what to do. And that's, I shared with you who at school, which is a lot of us here at school. There's also your family doctor, therapists, hospitals, immediately.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to Ms. Nevalon for your time and work on this, and passion for this topic and keeping our kids safe. And thank you, parents and families, for tuning in. Have a good day.